So today I'd like to post on YouTube a paint through of a painting that I did recently, or it's a fan art of a character from League of Legends or Arcane. It's Viktor. So the first thing that you're going to see once I play the video is the screen recording, or should I say the app recording from the painting app that I was using on my iPad. The reason why it always looks so smooth when people post their speed paints from the iPad on social media is because those apps don't record all the undos and some of the transforms and some of the other features that they actually use when they paint. The app doesn't record it. So if it looks very smooth, this is why. Once I'm happy with the initial sketch, I move the painting to the Photoshop. The reason I do that is because I just feel way more comfortable rendering and painting on the computer than the iPad. I feel very comfortable doing sketches on the iPad, but something about rendering is just so much easier for me to do on a larger screen on the computer. I am using a Cintiq Pro. The coordination is just so much easier for me. What you can see me doing right now on the screen is choosing the colors. I don't bother with softer brushes at this stage. I would usually go with brushes that are very bold, and it will be much easier for me to just see immediately the effect that the color has on the composition. Usually when I do this and I am unsure whether I like the result of the color schemes that I chose or I don't like it, I open a new file and I use it as a thumbnails file. So I will do a print screen each time I feel like, quote unquote, I finished the color scheme for this version, and I will just copy paste it to another file, and over there I will be able to see the differences between the versions and take what I like, erase what I don't like, and just create all these different small or big changes that eventually become a final version that I like. I've decided for this one to do a combination of very I would say grayscale colors for the characters compared to very bold and very bright colors for the background of the characters, because I wanted to use the language from the series, from the Arcane series. When the character is very realistic in their personality, like Viktor here, they usually would paint Viktor in very realistic lighting. And when the character is very dramatic in their personality, their lighting in the series would be very dramatic as well. So I've decided for the character of Viktor to use very natural gray colors that you would usually see on cinematics. And for the backgrounds for the Arcane infection, I use the language from the series to create those very bold, out of place colors that symbolize a being from another realm. You can see I have many layers in this file, and those layers are not very well organized. When I do professional paintings, I would be far more organized than what you can see me doing here. The reason why I don't bother to be as organized on my own personal paintings is because I just want to experiment and I just want to have fun with the experimentation. I would like to just test things out. As you can see, I have many layers on this painting already, even though we are just doing the sketch right now. We've only just started to do the rendering, and I don't really bother to work in an organized manner when I work on my sketches. This is here where I'm starting to be a bit more specific with the lighting and the shades and the details of the painting. I don't really go into rendering straight away. I first want to make sure that everything works together. Because of the way that I work, I usually feel more comfortable doing a lot of details in one layer. This is something that I keep for my free time work, not for my professional work, but it is much easier to render once you know that everything on the canvas is something that you are happy with. It will be very difficult to make large changes later on if you are working on very few layers. If you're a junior, I would recommend that you work on as many layers as possible separated into folders, depends on which object or on which part of the character you are working on. The rendering is pretty straightforward. I just take a brush with a texture that I like. I don't always use a textured brush, but for this painting I've decided to use something that is a bit more painterly because I wanted that softer fine art feeling. I usually pick an area that is the highest focus of the painting, such as the face, the hair, the center of the composition, and I started the rendering from there, mostly because I will choose the rules for the rest of the painting from this part of the composition. So if I choose to do shadows in a very specific way here, I will continue the same language for the rest of the painting. I don't always use the same language for all of my paintings, and this is why it's important for me to just check things out, experiment a little on a small area, just to make sure that I know what I want this painting to look like. Here I would pick different textures and different materials, such as the glass and the metal on the goggles and the skin and the hair and the leather of the strap on the head, just to be sure that I know what I want this painting to even look like. Do I want it to be more realistic? Do I want it to be smooth? Do I want the lighting to be very complicated with a lot of details, or do I want to smooth it out and make it very simplified? I need to be sure that I know what I want. I would not recommend going straight to just rendering the whole painting in one session. Usually when I start with very short sessions, 10 minutes, 15 minutes each time, and then I leave the painting. I either go do something else for at least an hour, if not more than that. I just want my eyes to be clean, and for the next time that I open this file, I want to be able to see all the mistakes that I've made and make better decisions. Sometimes I would start rendering another part of the painting, and then I wouldn't be sure exactly what I want it to look like, and I will go back to the central part of the composition to test things out and see what exactly I did there. It's important for me to say that those type of paintings that I do on my free time, it sometimes takes me several days, if not several weeks, to work on them, not because I am taking a lot of time to work. I am taking a lot of time off the painting, and sometimes I simply do not remember what solutions I came to the previous session that I worked on this painting. So I go to parts that I've already rendered. I am looking there to find the solutions for the new parts that I've decided to render today. You can see on this painting that there are a lot of lines of sketch that are left over. Usually in professional work you are not supposed to see the sketch lines, but here, because I knew that this was something that I'm doing for fun and it is a fan art, not a splash screen for an official commission, I've allowed myself to do something that is a bit more painterly and just loose. Part of it is also showing the initial sketch from underneath the rendering. If you want to avoid seeing sketch lines on your paintings, even though you are working in a very similar manner to me, I would recommend simply reaching a very fine sketch, one that has lines that are very strict, not a lot of like scribbling in the background. What I see sometimes other professional artists do when they work with a sketch and render on top of the sketch is that their sketch line, their final sketch line, is very thin, and the lines are really fine. So if this is something that you also want to do in your own painting process, you need to reach a very fine lines for the sketch. That way, even when we see some of like the brush strokes, it would be very gentle and it wouldn't really bother us. You can see here that the bold colors of the background of the infection are kind of invading the space that the character is taking in the composition. This is something that is usually not recommended when you do splash screens. Something that you would usually see on people that do character art, and I am personally using this trick a lot, is a very straightforward composition. It would usually be a triangle where you have one main part of the composition. In the case of character art, it would be the character's face, and then there would be some background details around the character, but you would design the composition in a way that would make the viewer see the face immediately. It can be by making the other objects in the painting more blurry than the character's face, including the character's body. It would be a bit more in the dark, a bit blurry. There would be some motion around the character, like hair is blowing or scarf that is blowing or some particles in the painting, but the face itself would be very high detail, and it would seem as if the camera focused on one point in a hurricane. One way to make it a more dynamic frame, even though you want the focus to still be on the character's face, is to make a very dynamic pose, but you have to make sure that the character's face would still be the most high contrast. If you are choosing to make a very dynamic pose or a very dynamic painting in general, as in the objects that you put around the character, please make sure that the character itself would be lightened in a way that leads the eye to the character's main area of focus. One way to do it is to do a graduation from dark to light or from light to dark. Either the character has a very bold shadow on her face, a bold shadow that you don't see on the rest of the character, or the character's body is very much in the shadow and there is a beam of light shining right on the character's face. Another way to add to it is to also make sure that your background is not taken away from the character. So if there is a light on the character's face, there would be some shadow behind it, and if there is darkness, some kind of shadow on the character's body, there would be rim light, as in a light that comes directly from behind the character or from an angle that makes the character pop. The light hits only the character and some objects around it, and it would make the character stand out from the background. So with that being said, I can tell you that in here I kind of ignored all of those rules, all of those ways to make the character seem like it's standing out from the background, and instead I wanted the background to kind of steal the show, the same way that the character of Viktor had let the infection of the arcane to steal his image and his personhood from his character. At this point, I came back to the painting after a long break from it, and I've noticed that I feel like the goggles are standing on a wrong angle on the head. I feel like it would be a bit too complicated for me to fix it because of the way that I was working in very few layers, and the layer of the hair with the goggles with the head is kind of mixed up. And I thought this was a good opportunity to, if you are a junior, to let you know how best to work in the future when you are starting a new painting for a company. So I would recommend to make sure that you are separating objects from characters. So if there is hair on top of the head, you can maybe do it together. But if the hair is some kind of crown, or in this case a strap holding an object, I would recommend to do at least the object itself in a separate layer. And also if there is a hand held over the face, I would recommend to do it in a different layer. How much you are going to go deep into the separation or how much you leave in one layer is really up to you and your own experience. And of course, you are free to make mistakes and learn from them. If you see that you have painted something and you suddenly can't change a detail that doesn't work out or that you were asked to remove, you will learn from it for the next time, and slowly you will build your own system. when I return for another session, I would kind of just light up different layers because I want to see what each layer is doing. Sometimes I mix layers up, and sometimes I think that I mixed too many up, so I separate them. And this is how I start each session on the painting. I just go over the layers, I see what's going on, and I make sure that I understand how this painting is built so that I won't make an error of judgment when I start the actual painting. Going into small details might be a bit of a struggle to some people, so what I recommend in order not to be overwhelmed is simply to start with things that are very, very small, even though they have a lot of details. For example, portraits or just one object. And once you feel comfortable adding more and more details to this one object or to this one portrait, you would feel more comfortable doing it on a larger and larger scale. Just train yourself to think in small details. If it seems like I know what I'm doing, that's an illusion. I feel like the rendering is really helping me quiet my brain. I have a lot of question marks floating around my head while I'm painting, even if it seems like I'm very sure of what I'm doing, like I know what I'm doing. While I was painting this piece, I was constantly like clutching my hair, asking myself what was I thinking to myself, just trying to find different ways to fix my own shortcomings. So whenever I was looking at the composition as a whole and asking myself, what is this? What even is going on here? As I said before, this is not exactly a classic composition in terms of character art. So I was just rendering to relieve myself from having to find solutions for my own very weird decisions. But at the same time, I won't lie if I say that I had a lot of fun just experimenting, just going around trying things that at the end didn't really work out, and I had to change and change again and just work out different versions of the same part. I just rendered and then smoothed it out and then rendered again and chose colors, but then I changed the colors, and it was really fun. I didn't think I would ever be able to finish this painting, and I think the only reason that I went on with it is because I just enjoyed the process. If I felt like I was forcing myself, or if I felt like I was breaking too many rules and I need to focus more on doing things properly, then this painting would probably have never seen the light of day. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I open a new window for the same canvas, and for the new window I'm putting it aside on the same screen, and I'm moving it to black and white mode, and this way I can tell where I am missing contrast and where I need to add some details that are lost in the black and white version. So I was frankly very surprised to see that the bold colors of the arcane help the character pop, at least in the black and white version, but there were still some parts that needed a bit more attention to details. There were parts that were I feel like I needed to really gentle down, so I've decided to lose some of the contrast that I have on the leg brace because it was too bright and it was catching too much attention. I've also decided that some parts on the face, especially the edge of the face, were not in enough contrast with the colors, so I've darkened them. I am constantly looking at the black and white version that I have on my screen to make sure that the colors that I'm choosing and the way that I am painting the piece look good both in the colored version and in the black and white version. I recommend that whenever you feel like you have finished your artwork and that it is complete, simply close it, because the next session when you open the same artwork you will see so many things that you can improve and that you can change for the better. This is what happened to me here. There were so many sessions where I thought I was finished, only to reopen this artwork a few days later and to see so many parts that I have missed or that they don't exactly look very good and I need to change. Some parts I was able to change, some parts I tried to change and realized that maybe I was not exactly improving, I was just changing things for the sake of change, and this is also not a very good thing to do. So it's a very fine balance to keep between making changes for the better but not changing too much. Leaving a few things raw and rough, because this is part of the painting process. At the end, I can say that I am happy with the result, although I am aware that there are many things that could improve here. I would rather keep going to the next painting so that I can possibly improve myself and practice and experiment on different things. I know that I can come back to this painting and continue to improve it, but I choose not to do it at this point. I would like to thank you for watching the video up until this point. You can also find this painting on Instagram if you'd like to inspect it some more. Please be aware that the version that you see right now on the screen and the version that you will see on Instagram are slightly different, because I did come back to this painting several times after posting it on Instagram, the most complete one. So the version that you see right now on the screen is likely to be the most complete one. If this video would get more than 5 views, I would consider making more videos like this in the future. If this is something that is interesting to you, please leave a comment to let me know what kind of subject you would like me to cover in the future. Thank you very much and have a nice day.